And Pesachim Aleph Vav. Rav Hanina, administrator of Kohanim, says, in all the days of the Kohanim, never did they refrain from burning sacrificial meat that had been consumed by a secondary tumor together with sacrificial meat that he had been contaminated by a primary tumor, although by doing so they added contamination to its contamination. Rabbi Akiva added, saying, in all the days of the Kohanim, never did they refrain from lighting oil that had become unfit through contact with the Tul Yom in a lamp that had been contaminated by one contaminated by a corpse, although by doing so they added contamination to its contamination. Reb Meir said, from their words we infer that we may burn uncontaminated truma, which is comments with contaminated truma on Pesach. Rabbi Yoshi said to him, this is not analogous. Even Rabbi Elias and Rabbi Shua concur that each is burned separately. Concerning what to do, they differ. Concerning what do they differ? Concerning suspended and contaminated tumor, whereas Rabbi Elias says that each must be burned separately, but Rabbi Shua says that both may be burned together. Right. Um, I just want to go through a little bit in the Vav. I'm not sure I understand that completely, so maybe you could
Sure.
explain a little.
Okay, of course. Okay. So when we're talking about the the tumor, and we'll see the reason for talking about this tumor now, is that we suddenly switched to the to what's happened in the Mikdash. Um,
Mhm.
and if oil became tame, then what you got to do? You got to burn it. But
Right.
but if it's but it depends, there are different forms of tumor, right? It became tame from an ava tumor, meaning that
Mhm.
the oil becomes a rishon, or it became tame from let's say a sheni tumor, in which case by truma and by kodshim it becomes a shlishi. So now, if you're going to set fire to them separately, okay, that's nothing happens. But let's say you pour them together so that you can burn them all together. Then you're taking your rishon oil and making it into a sheni.
Right. Okay.
That's the problem that they're talking about is like you're not allowed to make oil that was tahor tameh. But what about oil that's already tameh with a lighter? Sorry, beg your pardon. I said it the wrong way around. The oil that was a shlishi becomes a sheni. So,
Okay.
are you allowed to take something that's got a very light form of tumor and give it a stronger form of tumor, even though the din is that both of them are going to be burned? And that's what the Mishnah is saying is that no difference. They didn't have a problem with doing such a thing. And what do we come up with that is that is in Mishnah Zion, why it relates back to Pesachim, is that you're going to burn the chametz anyway. But what if
Uh-huh.
it's tameh, and you're taking truma that's tahor, and you're gonna stick it together with tameh chulin, and make the truma tameh before you burn it, and and so the question is, are you allowed to do that? And well, so this is Rabbi Meir. You can infer from this. The fact is that since it's going to a din of streifa anyway.
Right.
It's already past the time of burning chametz. So therefore, why keep it separate from the tamei chulin? Just
And that holds also for the meat in the first part of the Mishnah.
hmm?
That holds the same as with the meat in the first part of the Mishnah.
Yeah. So that's basically what we learned. Everyone's kind of in agreement with this that it's not so much the meat; they're talking about the oil. Actually. They also say with the meat. That's correct. You beg your
Right.
pardon. They do talk
Okay.
with the meat because even though it's adding tumah.
Okay.
Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Meir on this because he's saying that there are different reasons why they're being burned. One is being burned because it's tameh, and the other one's being burned because it's chametz. Doesn't mean so just because something's going to
Right.
be burned because it's chametz doesn't mean you can be metameh it. Um, okay, so that's and Rabbi Yossi says that Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua don't disagree about this one. That when it comes to chametz, you got to burn them separately. What's
Uh,
the what's the machlokes is if it's suspended and it's tameh, that Rabbi Eliezer says they still have to be burned separately, and Rabbi Yeshua says even though it's suspended, it's still going to have to be burned. So therefore, you can burn them
right.
together. Okay,
Uh,
carry on. You've got Aleph.
yeah, we have one more. We have olive. Called olive. As long as it is permitted to eat chametz, one may feed it to livestock, beasts, and birds, and sell it to the Gentile, and deriving benefit from it is permitted. when its period has passed, deriving benefit from it is forbidden, and one may not fire an sorry, okay,
Uh,
and one may not fire an oven or range with it. Rabbi Yehuda says there is no removal of chametz except by burning. But the sages say he may crumble it and throw it into the wind or cast it into the sea. Okay,
Excuse me.
okay.
Chametz shel nochri she'avar alav Pesach. If a non-Jew owned chametz, mutar b'hana. Okay, well that's a good thing because that's what we rely on every year. Chametz. So that it's okay. V'shel Yisrael asur b'hana shenema v'lo yera'eh lacha sa'or. Okay, so from this this is our basic first principles. Excuse me, I'm just cleaning my camera. Our basic first principles that you have to if you own chametz on Pesach, it becomes aser even after Pesach. Okay, and gives us the hint of how to get rid of it if you got a lot of it and you want to save it. You give it to the non-Jew. Okay. Nochri shehilva is Yisrael al chametzo. Now, what happens if a non-Jew lent money to a Jew, but he took the chametz as security? So what's the din with that chametz after Pesach? Is that achar Pesach mutar bahana? He's allowed to have it back. He pays back the loan, gets back the chametz. It was in the non-Jew's possession. So even though it was just a pikadon, it was just security for a loan. Nonetheless, it's permissible for the Jew to have it after Pesach. In the reverse case, however, Yisrael shehilva al esan nochri al chametzo. So the Jew lent money to the non-Jew and took his whiskey as a security. Achar Pesach after bahana. If the if the non-Jew doesn't pay it back, he doesn't get to enjoy the whiskey. And as a matter of fact, even if the non-Jew pays back and he gives him back the whiskey and says, "Come, let's make a l'chaim together."
They
Sorry,
can't do it.
can't do that. Okay. Chametz shenafla aleh hamapolis. Alav mapolis. So there was chametz, and let's say the building collapsed on top of it, and now there's just no access to it. Hooray, hu kemavoar. That is ki'ilu, it's been destroyed. You can't access it. It's no longer in the world, and therefore it's fine. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer kol she'ena kelev yachol lechapes acharav. And here's your standard for how to know if that chametz is truly inaccessible is if it's, let's say, dog food. If it were dog food and the dog smelled it and said, I'm going after that, can you dig after it? And if you can't get it, then you can say, okay, this is legit gone.
Okay.
Okay, Dalid. Ha ochel trumas chametz b'Pesach. Interesting little thing over here. Just to remind you of the background rules to rewind to the halachas in truma. If a Yisrael accidentally eats truma, okay, then what's his din? He has to restore the truma to the world. He has to take some chulin and pay it back to the kohen, and it becomes truma, and he adds the chomesh, and the kohen has no right to be mevater. He cannot be mochel. It's got to come back as chulin to truma. If the Yisrael ate it mazid deliberately, then now there's no restoring of the kedusha that he destroyed. Elamai, he's got to pay back the value of the truma. So he gives it back as chulin. It stays chulin. There's no chomesh, and the kohen can be mevater. He can say, "Listen, I don't care. Don't bother paying me back."
Mm.
Okay, so that's the difference between shogeg and mazid. Now we're going to see this play out in Pesach. Ha'ochel trumas chametz b'Pesach. If a Yisrael uh, came to the Kohen's house and found yeah, some yummy chametz over here. He didn't realize it was chametz. The Kohen forgot that he had this chametz in his house on Pesach, and the Israel wound up eating it. And then he says, "Oops, I think I just ate your truma." And the Kohen realizes, "Oops, I forgot to remove this truma." What does he have to do? Well, the chametz you should say the chametz is aser bahana, and it should have been destroyed, and therefore there's nothing worth paying back. But the fact is that since the whole thing happened b'shogeg, mishalem kirin v'chomesh, he still has to take after Pesach. He has to go and take some chulin and give it back to the kohen as truma and add on a chomesh, and the coin's not allowed to be mevatel because what happened? Tachlis, you took truma out of the world, even though the truma was asa b'hana, he took
Mm.
truma out of the world by mistake. Ma- Okay, but Mazid patur mitashlimim midvei eitzim. He doesn't have to pay back a thing. Why? Because when we have the truma story in Mazid, all we're talking about now is paying back the value. It doesn't. There's no truma. If you
Mm.
pay back kulin in back the rest of the year, it doesn't become truma, and the coin's allowed to be mavata, which tells you that this whole thing is just making restitution of the value. And
Right.
what's the value of chametz on Pesach? Zero.
Zero.
Not allowed to have comments on Pesach. So therefore, he does not pay back anything if it was a mazid.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Back to test.
Erevin. Erevin. Yud Aleph. One who
Test,
finds the
test,
filth.
test
Right.
valid, no? Let me just check that I get my numbers wrong, but I think it's test.
Testology, probably right.
Yeah.
Testology?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Testology. A secondary story built upon two houses or bridges under which a road passes, one may carry beneath them on Shabbos. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, but it could come and prohibit it. Rabbi Yehuda also said we make an error for an open alley, but the sages prohibit. One who finds tefillin should bring them in pair by pair. Rav Gamel says two by two. To what do these words apply? To old ones, but for new ones he's exempt. If he found them tied in pairs or bundles, he must wait until dark and then bring them in. But in a time of danger, he may cover them and leave. Reb Shimon says he hands them to a friend and his friends to his friend until it reaches the outermost courtyard. So too his child, he hands them to his friend and his friend to his friend, even if they are 100. Rabbi Yehuda says a person may hand a barrel to his friend and his friend to his friend, even beyond the Techum. They said to him, this should not go further than the feet of its owners. Okay. And Shabbos. Okay. Kaf Gimel Aleph. A person may borrow pitchers of wine or pitchers of oil from his friend, provided he does not say, lend me. In the same manner, one may borrow loaves of bread from a friend. If he does not if he does not trust him, he may leave his cloak with him and make a reckoning with him after Shabbos. So too in Yerushalayim, when the day before Pesach falls on Shabbos, he may leave his cloak with him, take his Pesach offering, and make a reckoning with him after Yom Tov. A person may count his guests and deserts early, but not from a written note. And he may cast lots with his children and the members of his household, the portion at the table, provided he does not intend to wager a large portion against a small one because of the prohibition of gambling. And a Kohanim may cast lots for sacrifices on Yom Tov, but not for portions. Okay. A person may not hire workers on the Sabbath, nor may a person tell his friend to hire workers for him. We may not go out may not go to await nightfall of the Sabbath boundary for the purpose of hiring workers or bringing produce, but one may await nightfall to enable him to watch and bring produce in his hand. Abba shall state a general rule: whatever I am permitted to instruct on Shabbos, I am permitted to wait a nightfall for it. Book today. Okay, that's it. That's the end of
Yes.
that. We are in Ma'aser Sheni. Ma'aser Sheni Gimel Yud Aleph. If a door bought with mice and money died, it must be buried with its hide. Reb Shimon says it may be redeemed. If one bought it alive and slaughtered it and became unclean, it must be redeemed. Reb Yossi says it must be buried. If one bought it slaughtered and became unclean, it is like produce. If one lends jars for mice sheni, though he sealed them, the mice does not acquire. If he poured them into them without specifying before he sealed them, mice does not acquire. After he sealed them, mice acquires. Before he sealed them, they are offered into one in a 100 to 1. And after he sealed them, they remain the holy any quantity. Before he seals them, he may set aside truma from one and all. After he sealed them, he must set aside for each one. Beit Shammai says he must open and empty into wine press base, but Beis Hillel says he may open but not empty. Where does this apply? In places where they are generally sold sealed, but where they are generally sold open, the jar does not become non-holy. However, if he wishes to impose a stringency on himself and sell by measure, the jar becomes non-holy. Reb Shimon says, likewise, if one says to his fellow, this jar I am selling to you without the jars, the jar became non-holy. Okay.
One
And
more.
we are on to Nida.
No, one more. There's
Oh, did I skip one?
yeah, we need
Oh,
no, you didn't skip any. You just didn't do Dalit Aleph.
okay. Now, if one takes Meiser shady produce from an expensive place to a cheap place, or from a cheap place to an expensive place, he redeems it as the price of his place. If one brings produce from the threshing floor to the city, or with jars of wine from the winepress to the city, the profit belongs to Ma'aser Sheni, and the expenses out of his household.
Okay.
Shop Nida. Nida Vav Ches. Every growth that is subject to beer is subject to spheres, but there can be a growth that is subject to spheres, but not is subject to beer. And every fish that has scales but has fins, but there can be a fish that has fins but does not have scales. Every animal that has horns has split hooves, but there can be an animal that has split hooves but does not horns. Everything that requires a blessing after it requires a blessing before it, and there can be something that requires a blessing before it but does not require a blessing after it.
Okay.
And Becharis. If a Bakor was purchasing him and he kicked it and inflicted a blemish upon him, he displayed slaughter on account of it.
Before was pursuing him.
What did I say?
I think you said purchasing, which didn't
All
sound.
right. It says purchasing here. Pursuing is what it's pursuing. If a Bakor was pursuing him and he kicked it and inflicted a blemish upon it, he may slaughter on account of it. For all blemishes that can be inflicted by man, shepherds who are Yisraelim are believed, but shepherds who are Kohanim are not believed. Reb Shimon Gamil says he is believed concerning his friend Bakor, but is not believed concerning his own. Reb Meir says one who is suspected concerning a thing may neither judge nor testify about it. A Kohen is believed, and I showed this Bakor to an expert, and it is blemished. All are believed concerning the blemishes of the Ma'aser offering. If a Bakor's eye was blinded, its foreleg cut off, or its hind leg broken, it may be slaughtered by the decision of 3 laymen. Rabbi Yossi says even if there are 23, it may not be slaughtered except for the decision of an expert. If one slaughters a bakor and sells it, and it becomes known that he did not show it to an expert, what they ate, and he must return their money to them. And whatever meat they did not eat must be buried, and he must return the money to them. Similarly, if one slaughters a cow and sells it, and becomes known that it was a treifa, what they ate, and they must return the money to them. And whatever meat they did not eat, they return to him, and he must return the money to them. And if they sold it to non-Jews or gave it to the dogs, they must pay him only for the worth of a treifa. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And we are in getting. Okay. Gimel Aleph. Sorry, it should be Gimel Aleph, correct?
Yes, that's
Any gift which is written without specific intent for a particular woman is void. How is this exemplified? If a man was passing through a street and heard the sound of scribes dictating, so and so is divorcing, and so from such and such a place, and he said, that is my name, and this is my place. This is my wife's name, and is void for executing a divorce with it. Moreover, if he wrote a get with which to divorce his wife, and he changed his mind, and a mind of his man of his city met him and said to him, my name is like your name, and my wife's name is like your wife's name, it is void for executing a divorce with it. Moreover, if he had 2 wives whose names were alike, and he wrote a get to divorce the elder, he cannot divorce the younger with it. Moreover, if he said to the scribe, write a get, I will divorce whichever one I want, it is void for executing a divorce with it. One who writes Tosfim of Gittin must leave blank the space for the name of the man and the space for the name of the woman and the space for the date. On documents of loans, he must leave blank the space for the name of the lender, the space for the name of the borrower, the space for the amount of money, and the space for the date. On bills of sales, he must leave blank the space for the name of the buyer, the space for the name of the seller, the space for the amount of money, the space for the field, and the space for the date, and for the sake of the benefit involved. The Yehuda validates all of them, or Elazar validates all of them except for Gittin. For it is written, he shall write for her with specific intent for her. If one was bringing a get and lost it, if he found it immediately, it is valid. If not, it is void. If he found it in a pouch or in a case and he recognized it, it is valid. One who brings a get and had left him old and ill may give it to her on the assumption that he is alive. Daughter of a non-Kohen who was married to a Kohen and her husband went overseas may eat truma on the assumption that he is alive. And if one sends his tin offering from overseas, he may be offered on the assumption that he is alive.
okay. That's
Okay,
it.
thank you. Okay,
Okay.
so I will see you tomorrow, and then you're going to go on your camping trip.
That's right.